So I'm pretty sure it was about 1974 when a neighbor of mine started telling me all about Scientology, and I was only 17 years old at the time. And I remember, I was hurting. It was not a good time in my life. I'd had a lot of family problems, a lot of anger issues, and some destructive habits. And I wanted to better myself somehow. So when my neighbor started telling me all about Scientology and inviting me down to a lecture in downtown Los Angeles by a gentleman named Seton Thomas, I was really impressed. He was a pretty dynamic speaker. And I signed up for a course, an introduction course to Scientology. And I remember my neighbor used to drive me down there every day. She was a really nice lady. She was trying so hard to help me in some way. And even though I think Scientology is a cult and a dangerous religion in many respects, I still appreciate the fact that my neighbor was doing her best to help me the best way she knew how. So no hard feelings there. In fact, I don't really have any hard feelings toward any of the Scientology people because I think most of them meant well. In their own distorted way, I think they meant well. So anyway, I joined Scientology. I'm taking this course, and actually, a friend signed up with me at the same time, although he quit after the first day. I remember he and I were giggling in the course room about something, and the instructor came over and started scolding us, wanting to know what we're laughing about. And after the course ended, my friend looked at me and he said, "You know what, this is like being back in school again. I'm out of here." Well, I was the guy that decided to stay with it and see what it was all about. So I eventually took this class called a communication course, and that was kind of fun. You have to do some pretty weird stuff, and some of it is kind of challenging. You're having to do things that are definitely not in my comfort zone, like sitting there and staring at somebody for 3 hours at a time, or nobody said you had to do it that long, but in my case, I was told to do it until I had what they call a win, or until I felt comfortable, or something like that. So it took me about 3 hours. I remember my eyes were all bloodshot from doing that, and it was weird stuff looking back on it. So after I took the communications course, I had an opportunity to join staff, and I thought, hey, why not? This sounds like if I want to reach a level of clear, this is going to be the fastest way to do it. And so part of the arrangement I made with our Scientology mission was that I was going to work for, partly for auditing. I wanted to get as much auditing as I could, as soon as I could. And it surprised me, because even after I had earned about 40 hours of auditing, they were in no hurry to give it to me. And finally, when they did give me some, it was up to about 60 hours, and I had to sort of beg our executive director, to get the process going. I wanted to reach the upper levels of consciousness and all that stuff, and I just wondered why they were kind of dragging their feet about giving me this auditing. I'd heard all these wonderful things about it. So I have to admit, I was pretty disappointed about the auditing. I was expecting something extraordinary, and I can't say that it really did anything for me that was all that extraordinary. I mean, I remember one time after leaving an auditing session, I think I felt like I'd seen a good movie or something like that. But as far as, being able to say that, wow, my life has changed, everything is great now, and the reds are redder and the blues are bluer, and none of that stuff. So, as I'm working on staff, I'm starting to see a side of the people there that doesn't seem to line up with all these things I heard about the people in Scientology that have reached these upper levels. For an example, my auditor, who was a neat guy, went over to his house one day, and he and his girlfriend were fighting, and I listened to the two of them, and I thought, they're just fighting like anybody else. I don't hear any special graces coming out of him because of the fact that he's a Scientologist, or I don't know what level he was at, but he was an auditor, so I'm guessing he had quite a bit of Scientology behind him. A lot of the Scientology members smoked. They didn't just smoke a little, but a lot of them smoked real heavy, and that was real common. I know some of them drank. I remember going to a Scientology party, and there was alcohol there. I don't know how many of them were getting completely bombed, although I do remember one particular moment. It was a Friday night, and our executive director, I guess he'd had a long week, and he said something about he was going to go home and get smashed. And when he said that, I turned my head and I looked at him with utter amazement, because I remember how anti-drug Scientology was. I mean, you weren't even supposed to take an aspirin if you were going to get auditing. And here was our executive director saying something about getting smashed. So I turned and I looked at him, and I'm just kind of like, I'm fixated on his face. And he turned and he looked at me, and I could tell just by the expression in his eyes he wished he hadn't let that out of the bag. So I guess there was some use of alcohol in Scientology. Only working on staff for about a year, I can't really say how prevalent it was. It's funny. I'm just trying to think back what else I remember as far as when it comes to drugs or well, I say this on the topic of sex. Now, you would assume a religion that has a big cross on the front would be, really, stick to traditional values when it came to sex, but it wasn't like that when I was in Scientology. I mean, there were people on staff with me that were shacking up with other people that weren't necessarily married, and nobody kept it a secret that I remember. And again, that big cross, you would expect a very Judeo-Christian standard of how we were to conduct ourselves. I understand now that cross was there basically to kind of throw the IRS off track and to make us look like a legitimate religion. So anyway, so while I'm working on staff, I'm hearing these incredible stories by these other staff members about their OT powers and how a lot of them tell me they can remember their past lives and they can, they left their body and different things like that. I remember testing one lady friend of mine to see if she could actually leave her body. So she turned around and tried to tell me how many fingers I was holding up. And she tried 3 times in a row, and she was wrong all 3 times. And when I saw that was one of those moments where I started to think, wow, is it possible that she's been brainwashed and she now thinks she has powers she doesn't really have? Well, it really got me thinking. And I saw other things that were equally as thought-provoking, like when this other young man came into our mission. His father gave us a whole bunch of money to audit his son, and his son was making some comment about suicide being an option, and I don't know how serious he was, but he was basically saying that auditing wasn't doing anything for him, and he followed it up with, well, I guess suicide's an option. It bothered me because I think, well, gee, here's this thing I'm looking forward to getting one day, and here's this guy with money that can actually afford to get some of their auditing, and he's saying it's not doing anything for him. That's not very encouraging. So, looking back on the whole thing now, again, I don't resent any of those Scientology people, even though I feel like I was taken advantage of. I think we were all part of a system. And, I was trying to get my friends into Scientology and my parents, and I'm glad my dad could see through it. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I remember at one point I had an opportunity to join the Sea organization, and they had a representative come over to our house and talk to my father about me joining the Sea Org. And the reason he came over is because I was only 17 years old at the time, and I wasn't old enough to go off on my own. So my dad said, well, no, I want my son to finish high school before he makes a decision like that. Otherwise, he didn't really make any. He didn't say that he didn't want me to join. And later, when I grew up, he said, David, I really didn't want you to be involved in Scientology. I just didn't want to tell you the truth because I knew if I told you I didn't want you to be involved, you'd just rebel and do the complete opposite of whatever I said. So he used reverse psychology on me. But I have to tell you, I remember going to that downtown Hollywood Sea Organization building, and I go down into their basement, and they give me a pair of headphones, and they had I think it was a reel-to-reel tape recorder. It was that long ago, and they put it on for me, and I was supposed to listen to this Hubbard give this lecture about the Sea Organization, what it's about. I remember sitting there feeling really uncomfortable, and I'm listening to Hubbard talking, and every time he'd say something, he'd breathe in real heavy afterward. You could hear like there was all kinds of mucus in his lungs. I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, he'd say something like this: the Sea Org is based on the 3rd and 4th dynamic, and you'd hear him breathe in, and he'd go, those that join the Sea Org find that, and I'm listening to this guy, and I'm thinking, man, this guy is supposed to be like you know, some sort of superhuman, and he sounds like he's sick. Well, I had like an anxiety attack when I was down there, and I remember I had to get out of there really bad, and I immediately walked up the stairs, and I walk out to the lobby, and I'm so embarrassed because I'm feeling like something's wrong with me because I'm having this terrible anxiety, but I've got to go. And I go up to the guy at the office, and I go, something like, I got to go. I just realized I got to go. I'll be back. And the guy looked at me kind of amused, like he could see something wasn't right with me, and it amused him. Anyway, I left the place, and I was very confused. I remember feeling like, oh, man, I must be crazy. What's wrong with me? And anyway, after that short experience, I realized I didn't want to join the Sea Org. I didn't like the whole environment. And hearing Hubbard, it, you know, kind of left a weird impression on me. Anyway, I'm rambling an awful long here. I like making these videos. It's fun to network with some of you old Scientology people. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to some of what I'm saying. And, you know, it's too bad I live far away from any Scientology center right now, but I think it'd be fun to go back and rub shoulders with a few of you old folks back there. Just curious if any of you out there remember Seton Thomas from back 40 years ago in the downtown Los Angeles Church of Scientology. Anyway, I've said enough. See you next time.